Season 2, episode 6. Here we go. We're flying along a little bit slower than I think we'd like to. But however, we're getting to that coasting speed. So maybe we'll pick it up here at some point. Rich Behan, Matt Majitsky here with you as always. And we're going to start right off the bat here with a guest today. We usually don't start with a guest. We usually put it in the middle of the episode. We're going to hit the ground running today because there's a lot we have to cover. And we're going to start it with this man right here, Tic Tac Tyler from Tic Tac Titans. Thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, we wanted you here because it's a very exciting time for Tennessee Titans football, and it got even more exciting over the weekend. The Titans trade for Julio Jones. I just want, before we get started here, kind of introduce us to your page and your podcast, and really just what were your first reactions when you saw that notification come across your screen that the Titans traded for Julio Jones?
Yeah, absolutely. So name is obviously Tyler Rowland, if people want to know the full name. But you can find me on Twitter at Tic Tac Titans. Kind of, corny dad jokes there, but I focus on the X's and O's. I like to break down things schematically. I really put a focus on what they're doing out on the field. Obviously, you got to talk about all the news, like the Julio Jones trade, for example. But that's what I do. I do that on the Locked On Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Been running the show for a little over or a little less than 2 full years at this point, but it's really taken off. So really proud of the work that we're doing over there, or I'm doing over there, I guess, on the Locked On Titans podcast. But spinning forward, talking about Julio Jones, I was actually on a live live stream program for the Locked On Podcast Network that they do on Sunday mornings. And my reaction was caught live on video and then turned into a meme and all of that. You can obviously see that on my Twitter. But I mean, it's something where I almost expected it, but you go through all of these different pursuits for the Titans, just a few to mention: Peyton Manning, Ndamukong Suh, things like that didn't pan out, and you didn't land the big fish. So they do it with Clowney last year, and you're like, oh, I've had them land it before. I've had them not do it. So to see them actually seal the deal, and it's not just that they were able to seal the deal for a big-time player, but they really needed Julio Jones. I'm sure we'll talk, about the Titans' actual team and depth chart situation, but they needed help at wide receiver. They needed help at pass catcher so bad to replace what they lost in free agency and were able to replace in the draft. So this was a big move, not only for, the clout of the situation and the PR spin, but also on the football field. The Titans desperately needed that wide receiver, that pass catcher help. So I was elated. It was a great time. It's always fun on social media when the whole fan base is engaged and entertained and we're all having a good time. But on the football field as well, it's even further excitement because this is going to make the Titans a better football team.
Well, Tyler, I guess I'll jump in here next. You look at that trade, and to me, I don't even have to ask you if the Titans won the trade, because I think we all know that the Titans clearly won this trade. So I guess the real question is, how do you think they did pull it off?
Well, there's been some reporting on the matter. Sports Illustrated's Albert Breer put out some good information. In that article, he said that Arthur Smith, who was the Titans' former offensive coordinator, just became the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. He said that connection there is just a coincidence, that didn't have anything to do with it. Well, I call BS on that. I can't help it. I think that clearly when you have relationships with people, it makes it easier to get negotiations and things like that done. So to say that Arthur Smith, being the Falcons head coach, just coming from the Titans organization, I don't think that that's fair to say that didn't grease the skids. A bunch of double negatives in there, but you guys know what I'm saying. Ultimately, though, like I said, it made sense for both teams. So the Falcons needed about $15 million in salary cap to sign their draft class. Also, teams just need wiggle room. People think, oh, you just need your salary cap to get your roster in place. You need salary cap space during the regular season when injuries happen. You want to claim vets that are released and things like that. So you need a little bit of wiggle room, a couple million going into the season. So this freed up cap space for the Falcons. And part of that, Albert Breer reporting, Julio apparently had considered asking for a trade in 2017 and 2019. So this is something that was kind of bubbling under the surface. I think that in itself, helped these things get along. And then the Titans need, along with the relationship between Arthur Smith and the Titans organization, all of that coming together just made it a perfect situation for the Titans to land Julio Jones.
Yeah, I think if you go back to we had our draft episode a few episodes ago, and I said that there was no chance that Julio Jones was going to be on this team to start the season for the Falcons. And I had them, I actually had them taking Devontae Smith, but of course, Kyle Pitts was available. So, of course, you take him. But, obviously they get to move Julio Jones now. They clear up that cap space. I want to touch on what you said a little bit before about the depth chart. They needed another wide receiver simply because Corey Davis was lost to free agency. I wouldn't consider them the same type of wide receiver. However, Julio is going to come in and fill a big body role along with AJ Brown. And now you have two of the more dominant wide receivers in the league on the same team. How does that help Ryan Tannehill?
Well, I think it helps Tannehill out in a major way because, I'm one of these people. I feel Tannehill is underrated. He's a top 10 quarterback. He's played like a top 5 quarterback over the last 2 seasons, if we're honest, and the statistics back that up. But I would say he's top 10 to be fair. The eye test does matter here. And with that, any player outside of like the top 5 quarterbacks who I would call the elite guys, Aaron Rodgers, Pat Mahomes, Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, and then it's hard to leave Tom Brady out of that mix, even at his advanced age. I just can't do it. So outside of those 5 guys, I feel like every quarterback has their strengths and weaknesses, and whether the team plays to those strengths or weaknesses determines where that guy is ultimately going to rank within that second tier. You think about a Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Matt Stafford, Ryan Tannehill right in there. So when you think about that, and you think about Ryan Tannehill's strengths, he's not a super, super accurate guy. He's not pinpoint placement like Tom Brady. He uses a big, strong arm, physical gifts that actually had him as a wide receiver early in his college career. He uses his mobility with the Titans' play action, bootleg scheme. He uses his strong arm to hit the ball over the middle and take advantage of the space created over the middle by the play action with Derrick Henry. So I think when you have big physical receivers, especially like A.J. Brown, who can do it after the catch, and then Julio Jones, you take advantage of what Ryan Tannehill does well. He can zip it into you over the middle for yards after catch opportunities, or he can bomb it deep. And when you have a guy like A.J. Brown who can go over the middle and create those, and then you have Julio Jones who even at his age can still get down the field and open things up, I just feel like it's a perfect complement to Ryan Tannehill's skills. And then, of course, a perfect complement to the engine of the offense, ultimately, Derrick Henry. But really happy with what the Titans have at wide receiver now. Quite frankly, before that, it was bleak. They had A.J. Brown. They had Josh Reynolds, who I think could do more than what he's done in L.A. He's been behind some talented wide receivers there, so he can step up a little bit. But having Josh Reynolds as your number 2 wide receiver, and people talk about losing Corey Davis, but the Titans lost Adam Humphries as well. They cut Adam Humphries to create salary cap space, and they only brought in Josh Reynolds. Josh Reynolds is a 3 or 4 wide receiver at best in the NFL. So there was a massive hole on the Titans roster at wide receiver too. And when you look at where they're at as a team, they're in win now mode. Ryan Tannehill is in his mid 30s. Derrick Henry's not going to be able to rush for 2,000 yards into his 30s like this. It's just the reality, even if he keeps going at a good rate for the next few years. Taylor Lewan's entering his 30s. They have an older offensive line that's still talented. Kevin Byard on the defensive side is getting closer to his 30-year season. So the Titans need to go all out right now. And with that big of a hole on the roster and filling that with the player of caliber that Julio Jones is, I think even though the depth chart was very shaky early on, I think now the depth chart's in a great place, and that depth chart perfectly suits what Ryan Tannehill does well. It's a perfect storm for the Titans offense to keep going with what they've been doing the last 2 years.
Well, I'm going to take it a step further here, and I know you argued your point there great, but, I think there's going to be a lot of people around the NFL arguing between the best 2 offenses, Kansas City and Tennessee, right now on paper. So I'll propose this to you. I'll take the best 3 players from each team. Talking about playmakers, I'm going to leave Tannehill and Mahomes out of this. So if someone brings you the argument, hey, who do you think's better, the combo of Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, or the combo of Julio Jones, A.J. Brown, and Derrick Henry?
Well, that's very difficult to say because how it would be graded. The reality is the Kansas City Chiefs trio outside of rushing yards are probably going to put up more numbers. You know what I mean? It's just the offense they're in. Pat Mahomes is a factor there. But I think taking a look at the situation, I would personally take the Titans trio in a vacuum. If we were just drafting a team and starting fresh with no quarterback, and you gave me, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Hill, and Kelce versus Julio, A.J. Brown, and Derrick Henry, Derrick Henry is such a big level up above Clyde Edwards-Helaire, even though he doesn't have the receiving, chops that Edwards-Helaire possesses. But you look at the other 2 guys, Tyreek Hill, I know people are going to bring up Julio Jones, but Julio Jones is not an injury prone guy. He missed 7 games last year, but that's the most he's missed since like 2013, 2014. Other than that, he's played 15, 16 games almost every year of his career. So I would personally take, and AJ Brown's also very young, 23 years old. I'm going to take AJ Brown with the youth being much younger than the guys in Kansas City, combined with Derrick Henry being such an advantage over Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Julio Jones and Travis Kelce kind of even themselves out. They're both kind of later in their career. So to me, I'm going to go with the Titans trio, but I will admit, I have to say, if we take the caveat of who the quarterbacks are, clearly the Chiefs guys are going to be more statistically productive. But if you remove the quarterback from the equation, I'm taking the Titans trio. And I don't feel like that's a homer opinion either.
No, I would too.
Well, I guess we'll get you out of here on this, Tyler. I just wanted to kind of gauge here I hate using this term of power rankings because really there is no such thing as power rankings.
It's, right.
Your
it's
personal
real to
opinion.
us, Rich. It's real
exactly.
to us.
Your personal opinion is going to come out anyway, but for the sake of the exercise, I will use the term power rankings. If you take a look at now the landscape of the NFL and you take a look at where power rankings would stand, I would have to assume that after this trade, the Tennessee Titans are in the top 5.
Yeah, I guess that, and I think they're right there on that. And it kind of depends on how you stack things out, just personal preference in each person. In my opinion, there's 3 teams that are at the top, and we can't deny those teams: the Chiefs, the Bucks, and the Packers. The Packers have been in the NFC Championship game 2 years in a row. They got the MVP quarterback. They have one of the top. We talk about trios. If you include quarterback, I mean, Rodgers, Aaron Jones, and Devontae Adams, that's pretty good. So I know they're having their issues and turmoil this year, but when they get out on the field, it's hard to not put the Packers in the top tier. After that, though, you look at teams that could be in the mix, like the Browns, the Bills, the Ravens, the Titans. Maybe a team like the Seattle Seahawks can get back in that mix right there. So you look at those 6 or 7 teams. How do you rank those teams? To me, I still put the Bills over the Titans. I like what they got going on in Buffalo. I'm just a big fan of how they're building their program out there. So outside of that, though, I have a lot of enemies who are Browns fans because of my coverage of the Browns-Titans game last year, so I don't want to go too crazy. I know Browns fans will hate this, but I think with the trade and with what the Titans have done on the defensive side of the ball and trying to reallocate their resources there and then getting this Julio Jones trade done, I think you could put the Titans squarely at 5, 6, 7, somewhere in there. But, I mean, if I had to nail down a top 5 right now, I don't see any reason at this moment in time to keep the Titans out of that 5 spot.
All right, well, thank you so much, Tyler Rowland from Tic Tac Titans. That was so good catching up with you. Thank you so much for joining us here. And, well, good luck to the Titans this year. And then hopefully we can circle back around to it at the end of the season. And who knows, maybe you will be hoisting a Super Bowl trophy.
Man, that would be stepping out of being someone who covers the team and things like that. I would be purely in fan mode while recording the next edition of Locked On Titans after the Titans won the Super Bowl. I might just cry for like 28 minutes straight on the show. It's something, it's hard. The Titans aren't one of those teams that you feel like is going to win a Super Bowl. They're kind of, below average in terms of brand and things like that. Hopefully these sort of moves where they're getting these big fish, they're playing well for consecutive years, will change that. But ultimately a Super Bowl trophy is the only thing that will really certify the Tennessee Titans as a bona fide top franchise in the NFL. And if that happens, I'll come on every show for every person. I'll talk to people under the bridge about it. So I'd love to come back on anytime. Thank you guys.
That's Tic Tac Titans on Twitter. Tyler Rowland, thank you so much, man. Back here on Hall of the Sports, Rich Behan, Matt Majinski, now by ourselves. But again, a huge thank you to Tyler for coming on and talking to us about the Julio Jones trade. We were sitting there kind of just before we get into everything else here we have planned for you. We were sitting there and we were like, okay, what are we going to do for our next episode? And then literally seconds later, Julio Jones gets traded. So we're like, okay, that's obviously topic number 1. And then kudos to Matt for finding Tyler, because that's probably one of the best interviews we've done,
if I put my 2 cents on the Titans, I think that they're going to be a contender in the AFC East. I left a few questions out. I'm sure, we would have loved to talk to Tyler for more, but, to me, this move does put them right up there with KC and Buffalo. Obviously, just taking two teams last year that made it to the AFC Championship, and if anything, maybe gained from last season if Mahomes is healthy, and then the Bills adding Emmanuel Sanders. But adding Julio Jones, I think, moves the Titans ahead of, the AFC's had these teams that have between the Titans and the Ravens, obviously the Browns last year. I think it moves them out of that category and puts them almost in it goes the Chiefs at 1, and then a 1A Bills, 1B Titans, where they're right there. And who knows, maybe Aaron Rodgers could be the next guy headed to Tennessee, because I saw that viral picture of all the Rodgers jerseys in that Nashville sporting goods store. And maybe that is a thing to come.
We will have to wait and see. We're going to have some rant topics here for you in a little bit. We'll get to that in a bit, but we wanted to come here and reset the NBA playoffs for just a couple seconds. And we're going to give our storylines here. We're going to call this segment our storylines for the NBA playoffs. We'll go just at the first round. Obviously, the second round has started, and we've seen some teams absolutely dismantle others, and we've seen teams not show up. I think you could guess as to who I'm talking about there, given last night's performance, or maybe by the time you guys hear this 2 nights ago, their performance. So we are going to keep this to strictly round 1. We're each going to have 3 storylines, and I guess I will start and go first. My number 1 storyline overall is that if you didn't believe it, you should now. I think the Nets are above and beyond everybody else in this bracket. And I'm not going to say it pains me to say it, considering what Nets fans have had to deal with in the past. Obviously, the Garnett trade is the big piece there. But now the Nets sit here and they pull off all these moves. Sean Marks does a tremendous job to get this team assembled. And not only are they living up to the hype, I actually think they're exceeding it. When they started making all these moves, I think Kyrie was the first shoe to drop. Or maybe Kyrie and Kevin Durant the shoe dropped at the same time. But my initial reaction to Kyrie was, I don't know if I'm going to like it, and I don't know if it's going to work. And then you added KD in, and I was like, okay, KD already played with a Kyrie Irving type point guard, and it didn't work out. And then you added James Harden in, and I was like, okay, this is going to absolutely blow up. There's no way these 3 are going to work together and work together well. And I will be the first one to say, boy, was I wrong. If one of them comes out of the lineup for injury reasons, the other 2 excel. If they're in the lineup at the same time, all 3 of them, they're virtually unstoppable. I have to say they've passed the ball better than I thought. And they've been 3 really good teammates. And then, of course, you do have guys like Joe Harris and Nick Claxton has really stepped up for this team, and adding Blake Griffin. So my first storyline is that if you didn't believe in the Nets, you should now, because they are an absolute force. My second storyline has to do with the Clippers and Mavs series, because the Mavs blew a chance here. They should have been able to close out this Clippers team. And my biggest concern here moving forward for the Mavs is not Luka Doncic, and it's not everybody else that is surrounding them on that team. It's Kristaps Porzingis. This is a guy who has now really just become so tunnel vision in his abilities in the NBA. He no longer tries to do anything else except shoot the 3 and try to extend himself out beyond the arc. Now, it might have to do with injury problems. He doesn't want to go in and get beat up in the paint, or it might just have to do with the modern day NBA. But when the Mavs traded for Kristaps Porzingis, Mark Cuban thought that he was putting together the next powerhouse in the NBA, and rightfully so. But it is safe to say that Kristaps Porzingis has not lived up to that, and really has not helped Luka at all. I mean, he's begging for help at this point is Doncic. The Mavs had a chance to put the Clippers away. I am not blown away with the Clippers at all. I don't see them going very much further here in this bracket. But I will say I'm more concerned here about the Mavs than I am about the Clippers. And that is storyline number 2. And of course, storyline number 3 is going to have to do with my Knicks. I do not want to go back and talk about how they played, how horrendously they shot, and how Trae Young gets on everybody's nerves that lives in New York and roots for the Knicks. I don't want to go back to that. I instead will choose to look towards the future and tell you that after watching this series against the Hawks, and for as good of a team as the front office and Leon Rose and Tom Thibodeau put together this year, this Knicks team is missing a superstar, and they are missing a superstar that can shoot the ball effectively. Now, I do not necessarily know how they're going to get one. Julius Randle, for as good as he played this year, of course, winning the Most Improved Player award, he is a star. However, he is not a superstar. I don't really want him to be the first option on my team. He's going to be a darn good second option, and RJ Barrett is then in turn going to be a damn good third option. But this Knicks team needs a superstar, and they need a superstar bad. Of course, your mind goes to Damian Lillard right away. Do the Knicks have the ability to pull off a trade for Damian Lillard? Yes, they do. But it is going to take everything to get him here. It's going to take multiple picks. It is probably going to take Emmanuel quickly. And right now, I don't know if the Knicks are really in a position where they want to give that up, because I truly believe Emmanuel quickly is a star. Now, you could say maybe Kawhi Leonard is on his way, which maybe, yes, he is, if he opts out after this year with the Clippers, which really, I don't know if it's working in LA, and I don't know if he thinks it's working in LA. The main question is, and always will be, does Kawhi want to come to New York? And that's a question that you're going to have to wait and see answered. A, if he opts out, and B, if he does opt out, does he even entertain coming to play in New York? Because if he does, then finally the Knicks, I think, would be completely back on the map. I think the Knicks are back on the map in some way because they made the playoffs this year and, of course, weren't picked to make the playoffs. And then they did. But then you have to look forward and say, okay, this team still needs a superstar. They need consistent scoring. They didn't have it this year in the playoffs, and that's what led to their first round exit against the Hawks.
And I kind of want to come back at that with, you got to do it the right way. When the Knicks got Amari Stoudemire, there was nothing wrong with trading for Carmelo Anthony, although I think they would have landed him in free agent that time anyways. And I think we might have been talking about a much different Knicks team that might have been able to keep Danilo Gallinari on that team, which might have made all the difference in itself. Wilson Chandler was still a great player. You never know. I'm okay with the Knicks giving up picks and Emmanuel quickly. I'm really okay with that. I'm not okay if they have to give up RJ Barrett as well. I'm okay from a perspective because Damian Lillard, the minute Carmelo Anthony retires, Damian Lillard will transition into my favorite player in NBA. But how much are you willing to give up, and at what expense, knowing that you already do have a star, but knowing that, yeah, it matters a lot in this league that you keep some good bench options. I hope the Knicks re-sign Reggie Bullock. I hope they pick up some other players in free agency. It's not a great year for free agency, but it's one where they could get maybe a guy or two off the bench. Either way, if they pair him with a star like Lillard or Leonard, I think this team is a title contender. If they don't get one of those stars and they ultimately just have to resort to a free agent or two, I think it still will help them because it's a team that's on the rise, and I think someone's going to want to come there. But I'll transition into my three. And I, too, will start with the Brooklyn Nets. And I'll start from kind of the same perspective you did, Rich, but I guess maybe a different lens. And that's that, we're both members of the media. I think we could say that. And I've been on record at least I'll say that I was on record saying this probably as early as before game one, that I thought the Milwaukee Bucks might become the NBA champions for the way that they dismantled the Miami Heat, the way that the Brooklyn Nets at times struggled with the Boston Celtics. I don't know how that was a thing without Jaylen Brown. And I said, look, I think Giannis is on a mission. I don't know what mission he's on. I don't know if he's playing superstar mode and the Nets are still on rookie, but there's something going on there that's not making sense because Giannis has the Bucks on paper still have a great team. My point being made is as media members, and I'm a prisoner of that, but are the media as a whole trying to create these storylines to maybe make the NBA playoffs more watchable when it's clear at this point that the Brooklyn Nets, who have three of the top 10 players, whatever way you look at it, whether you want to say three of the top seven, three of the top, I won't go as far as five, because I could probably think of five better players, but Kevin Durant is damn near the top player in the NBA. Kyrie Irving, I've always said it, is the most skilled player in the NBA. And James Harden, at times, is the most unguardable player in the NBA because once he starts getting those calls, there is no right way to guard him because then you just start thinking. And Kevin Durant is also the most unguardable player in the NBA. And I used to say this for that Warriors team that Stephen Curry is the best shooter in the NBA. Klay Thompson's also the best shooter in the NBA. And guess what? Kevin Durant, he's the best shooter in the NBA. And you had no wrong answer because how can you deny it? How you can't. I mean, sure. I mean, from the Durant perspective, maybe just pure shooting from Curry and Thompson. Obviously, Durant can hit from threes at a great clip as well, but that's obviously more of a three-point argument. But still, it's the same argument with this Nets team. And to your point, you mentioned, I mean, Joe Harris is also the best shooter in the NBA. And, having DeAndre Jordan there in practice, whether or not if he's playing in the games, and then Blake Griffin, who I don't know if he was just toying with Detroit or if he just magically just got some magic steps in him or whatever he bought from the store to make him.
He bought Michael's secret stuff from the Toon Squad.
Salt in the shoes, baby. Salt in the shoes. Blake Griffin signed up for the salt in the shoes, and I need answers right now. But I'll continue that into my second NBA storyline, which is the changing of the guard. No LeBron, no Curry, who I think you'd argue have been the two most transcendent players in today's NBA, at least, Kobe Bryant was probably still in today's NBA. I would consider Shaq maybe before today's NBA in that weird Jordan to LeBron era, for those who might try to argue that. But they're not in the playoffs. And Curry obviously was eliminated before the first round. I guess you can't consider it the playoffs, but it's still the postseason. It's not, the play-in isn't the regular season. He still made it to the postseason. And they both got eliminated at the hands of, Chris Paul led that Phoenix Suns team in the regular season at the hands of Devin Booker in this playoffs. Donovan Mitchell and his Utah Jazz, Trae Young and his Atlanta Hawks. At this point, it's the changing of the guards because I'm a little bit scared, and I guess this might be a topic for another episode, is who's going to be the next great player, because between Jordan and LeBron, you didn't have much time before you found the next one. Once Jordan retired to when LeBron came on the scene and you kind of already knew he was there. Kevin Durant's already in his 30s, so you're not just going to magically transition to him. I don't believe it's any of these guys that are in the NBA right now, but you never know because in the Steph Curry era, you might transition from that pure scorer to the pure playmaker that LeBron is to the pure three-point shooter. And maybe we won't ever get the GOAT again. But my point is that the current GOATs are out and the new superstars are in. And then my third point is Damian Lillard, who, again, I've mentioned he's my favorite player in the NBA once Mr. Anthony retires. And Damian Lillard, this one hits home. So excuse me if I go off on this for a little bit. Why are people trying to seemingly force Damian Lillard out of Portland? And my point here is that, is loyalty just not a thing in sports anymore? Like, is it not cool that Kobe Bryant won however many championships with the same Los Angeles Lakers franchise, that he didn't have to go anywhere? That sure, he got Pau Gasol. Pau Gasol is an all-star. He's a Hall of Famer. Kobe Bryant didn't need Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. He didn't need to then go back to Cleveland. Kobe Bryant didn't need to be Kevin Durant. Kobe Bryant stayed with the same team and won championships. Tim Duncan did the same thing. From a lighter perspective, Carmelo Anthony never won a championship, but he went to the team that he wanted to represent in the New York Knicks. He wanted to try to win there. He didn't get the pieces around him, but he was loyal to the team that he wanted to be loyal to. There's players in the past that have spent countless of years with an organization. Paul Pierce waited so long until he got his first championship. He wanted to be on that Celtics team and get that championship. Why now does it seem that in the case of a star like Damian Lillard, who spent almost a decade in Portland, and people think, oh, he needs to get out of Portland, instead of maybe Dame's time hasn't come yet because someone like Paul Pierce had to wait over a decade to get his first chip. And to the point even further, maybe Damian Lillard feels pressured to leave Portland, but what's wrong with him being loyal to the team that literally took the chance on a kid out of Weber State? Because to me, right there, it's just been the story of Damian Lillard, a guy that wants to play for the team that drafted him, and everyone else wants to make it about, you can't win with CJ McCollum, get out of Portland because Portland doesn't like you enough to put a team around you. That's what it's gotten. It's gotten to the point where if you don't have a championship team, oh, that franchise doesn't care about you enough. Maybe it's because there's 32 teams and it's impossible to fit all 10 superstars onto 32 teams. And then when you get the 11th guy and hope he becomes a superstar, or in the guy of CJ McCollum, who at this point is a wonderful second option in the regular season, I just don't know if it cuts in the playoffs. You're like, oh, well, CJ's the reason, get them all out, restart. I don't think that's the way it works. I wish it didn't work that way. And for Damian Lillard's case, I hope they get Jason Kidd or Chauncey Billups as head coach. And I hope it for an ulterior reason as well, because Mr. Anthony might be winding down his time in Portland, and he has relationships with both Billups and Kidd because he played with them. So on my behalf, that might be another year or two he gets to spend in Portland as well, because I couldn't see them cutting their pal. I'm done.
Yeah, that you definitely shine a light there on a trend that I think that the NBA has been going down this road for a while, and I just think that we've now reached the climax of where we are, and I think the biggest part of it, because it was it was either last offseason or the offseason before that, everybody rushed to put together a duo. The Mavs wanted to put Porzingis with Luka, and they wanted it to work. The Clippers wanted Paul George and Kawhi. That was the summer that really, I think everybody collectively in the NBA put their head together and said, okay, this is the trend we're going towards. We have to fully lean into it. And to your point, I think Dame and CJ is a very good combination, but it just seems that I think NBA fans are greedy. Honestly, I think that's a good way to describe them. I think they're greedy because they want to see the best players on the brightest stages, and Damian Lillard 100% falls into that category. And I think everybody wants him out of Portland because they've seen enough. Because I mean, personally, I think Terry Stotts is a good coach. I didn't think Terry Stotts was the problem. I mean, he had a winning record. They reached the playoffs. I think it was something along the lines of like 6 consecutive years or something like that. Did they ever win? No, but at least it was a program and a model for consistency. But even if your consistency is good, but it doesn't produce the high end results, you're still going to get canned. And so for Terry Stotts, that was the problem. And then now Portland comes out and says, okay, we want Damian Lillard's input in picking a head coach. And then he says, nah, I'm good. So that also then kind of gets the fans thinking, okay, well, if your franchise came to you and said, you're our franchise guy, we basically want you to hand select the coach that you want. That's what happened with the Nets. Kevin Durant walked in the room. Sean Marks walked in his office and said, hey, KD, who do you want to coach you? And KD said, Steve Nash. Steve Nash has never picked up a clipboard in his life before this year. And now he's coaching the Nets and is probably going to win a championship in his first year. So in Portland's case, they go into Dame and they say, hey, listen, who do you want on the bench? Dame's like, I don't really care. I'm still going to ball out. So I think Dame is perfectly content in Portland. And to your point, everybody's just trying to push him out. And all the fans are trying to push him out because I just think the fans are greedy and they want Dame to win.
Yeah. And just to quickly, I think you're totally right. And I'm glad that you see the point too. And, on Terry Stotts, I feel like it's something where Dame seems like he's lost a great friend. I think, as far as, from the coaching perspective, to me, I think the biggest gripe I had with Stotts were his in-game adjustments. I think he was a coach who maybe got the players to play well together. There were no gripes with the players. Looked like they had fun practices. Looked like, he was able to handle stars. I mean, come on, like you got some pretty big personalities on that team. Besides Damian Lillard and CJ, you still got Carmelo. You got Yusuf Nurkic. You got Enes Kanter. You got a pretty big, bulk of guys there that have made a lot of money in their NBA careers that you got to take care of. And he did a great job with that. I just don't know if maybe his adjustments in the games were good enough. But you make a great point that he was a good coach. And how do you replace a guy that led you to all those playoffs and then expect another guy to do the same? Because coaching matters a little bit more than people think in the NBA.
All right, let's take a quick break here on Hall the Sports. You're either listening to us on SoundCloud or you're watching us here on YouTube. I'll give you a little wave there as we go to break. We'll be right back. We'll go over some rant topics and we'll catch you after the break. Back here on Hall the Sports, Rich Behan, Matt Majinski. This is going to be our last segment of the episode, and we're going to wind it down by revving it up here with some rant topics because I'm going to get a little heated. I'm going to let you know right now. So I'll go first while Matt formulates and figures out his topic. I want to take you back to Sunday night because I witnessed probably one of the most egregious calls on a baseball field I've ever witnessed. That might be putting it, that might be a little extreme. But not only do I have to watch Sunday Night Baseball, I have to watch a baseball game broadcast by ESPN. And I have to listen to A-Rod tell me 4,000 times that the Yankees lineup is too right-handed. Yes, thank you, Alex. We know that already. Then I have to sit through a baseball product that is being absolutely ruined by umpiring. It has gotten to the point where it is absolutely pathetic. The game is on the line. The Yankees go into the bottom of the ninth, losing by a run. Gleyber Torres, who's finally starting to percolate a little bit here, doubles into the left field corner. Yankees tied the game. Yankee Stadium's going crazy. Everything is, you finally have a good product on the field. And then what do the umpires do? They ruin it. Because Rougned Odor looked at a 3-2 ball that was in the other batter's box. It literally went over the line of the right-handed batter's box. And what does the ump do? Rings him up for strike 3. It's just pathetic. You don't know what's going to happen there. Odor draws the walk he rightfully deserves. Yankees got men on first and second. Keep the line moving. A single most likely wins the game. But no, what happens? The Yankees don't get that call. Game is tied. They go into extra innings. And now you have to deal with an extra innings rule. And the Red Sox take the lead and they win the game. We've now gotten to a point where umpiring is not only making bad calls, but it's changing outcomes of big division games on national television. You're now putting one of your biggest flaws on display for the whole world to see. And I say one of your biggest flaws because I'm not even going to touch the topic of pitchers using pine tar today, because I don't want this episode to last another 30 minutes. So I'm going to save that for another day. But I just wanted to detail about how poor the umpiring is in Major League Baseball. And people want to say, oh, Major League Baseball doesn't even have the worst umpires and the worst referees. It's the NBA. It's the NHL. Tell me what you want. The NFL. Listen, I think the replacement refs of the NFL did a better job than these guys they got umpiring Major League Baseball games. I live on Staten Island. I could go down to South Shore Little League and find some umpires that are doing a damn pretty good job that could probably get called up to the majors today and have better eyesight than Angel Hernandez. And Angel Hernandez wasn't even that's friendly fire right now. Angel Hernandez wasn't even doing the Sunday Night Baseball game, but he's the first one that comes to mind. It just amazes me that Rob Manfred can sit in his office and with all the problems people talk about baseball, pitchers using pine tar, the baseballs were extra juiced a few years ago. Now they took it out and the home runs are back down. Of all the problems baseball has, nothing on the field should change that behind the plate and the guy standing in foul territory down the first and third base line. That's it. That's where I want to leave it off because I don't want to keep going any further and belabor the point. But to tie everything in a bow, I have 3 words for you. Robot umpires, please. I'm tired of watching humans screw up a game when we don't need humans to screw up a game. It is 2021. We have progressed past the need for human umpires to make human mistakes. You want the game to be perfect? You can have the game perfect. You just have to do it.
All right. So that leaves off a big heated topic by Rich. And I'm going to be short with mine because mine's not as heated. I feel like my Damian Lillard little piece there was kind of like my topic. So I'll transition into a golf thing. Rich told me that he's going to talk about John Rahm. And I said, you know what, honestly, golf's a good idea. I'm not going to touch on Rahm, but I do thank you for bringing that up because I was, sometimes it's tough to think of these rant topics past the NBA or past basketball because that's what I got my eyes on most of the time.
Right.
But I will stay in golf with Ricky Fowler because he missed the U.S. Open. It's the second major out of 3 that he's missed this year due to kind of exemptions and basically there's a whole rule of when you can make and when you can qualify for the U.S. Open. I'm going to try to Google it as we're on right now. And hopefully something pops up. But basically, Ricky Fowler ended up 1 shot short of qualifying for the U.S. Open. And doesn't look like I can find a article quick enough, so I won't go into it. But I'll explain it the best that I can. Is that there's all these things you need to finish in the top however many of a major in the last however many years, or the top of a tournament, or the FedEx Cup standings, or all these categories, and when's the last time you won, and things like that. When you look at Ricky Fowler, unfortunately, he's kind of been a guy that the media has always been around him. He hasn't always won a lot of tournaments. His last win was the 2019 Waste Management, which to me, I'm like, if you're relevant and you've won a tournament just 2 years ago, why can't you get in? But the U.S., it's something where you have to win in the past year or something, and it's this whole thing and all that. My point being made is, and I don't say this often because I think PGA runs a very good. I never have many gripes with the PGA. I will say I think they need to do better here because going into a major, or let's say any event, if Ricky Fowler is committed to play your tournament, that's a headline. For all due respect to a lot of these golfers out there, I really don't know if there's more than 10 or 15 guys that I could say I'd want at my golf tournament than Ricky Fowler. He's not committed to play the Travelers. I'll read this off right now because the Travelers is my home tournament. Rich, I know you don't know much about golf, but I want you to count on your fingers while I read this up, and we'll do it at the same time so we can compare guys that you think are maybe more marketable than Ricky Fowler.
Sure.
So I'll start this off. And excuse me, I'm just getting my Google set up a little bit. I just called it my Google. I feel like I'm like so old for calling it my Google.
My
But,
Google.
all right, I got everything.
It's nobody else's Google, ladies and gentlemen. It's just Matt's.
And I promise, after this is done, I'm done with my rant. But here's the early commits for the Travelers, and most of these guys are headliners. Sure. So again, finger for every guy who you say is better / more notable than Ricky Fowler. Okay. Abraham Answer, Keegan Bradley, Patrick Cantlay, Paul Casey. And right there, I'm like, okay, maybe I could put maybe those two together. So I'll put up a finger.
Right.
Jason Day. I'm not gonna at this point in his career. He hasn't really won in a while. Bryson DeChambeau. Dustin Johnson. Max Homa. Brooks Koepka. Mark Leishman. Patrick Reed. Could go either way on that because people like to hate on Patrick Reed. Justin Rose. I'll put a fifth finger up because, again, you combine some of those guys and you're like, okay. Cameron Smith and Bubba Watson. For the point of the Travelers, Watson's the most marketable guy for that tournament right there with Jordan Spieth. And, again, other guys coming into this tournament that have played it in the past might be Spieth or McIlroy. But the point of the matter is I listed off almost 15 guys, and we only came up with 5 guys. And those are early entries are normally the guys in golf tournaments, for those who don't know, that are the headliners. While there might be guys that commit in the few weeks, it's normally not the people that are committing at the last minute that are guys that you're going to want to watch. It's the guys that commit weeks and months before that they want to get people to buy tickets for. Ricky Fowler would have been the 5th or 6th best name on that list. Again, we had a few guys that we went back and forth with, but the point of the thing is that this is a good tournament. You got DJ in there. I mean, Rich, you don't follow golf that well at all. And again, that's not a gripe on you. I'm just saying, like, golf isn't your biggest sport, but you still knew that Ricky Fowler is a bigger name than a lot of those guys. And a lot of those guys, like, I mean, having DeChambeau and Dustin Johnson in your tournament is pretty big. And I don't know. It's the U.S. Open. I think that if you're going to make an exemption, you should make an exemption, and Ricky Fowler should be allowed to play. There's my little bit more extended than I wanted it to be, but.
Well, it's a sport that needs eyeballs for sure and deserves eyeballs. And hopefully we'll see a change in the future. Good stuff out of Matt. Good stuff out of Tyler from Tic Tac Titans. Again, a huge thank you to him. A great episode overall. Season 2, episode 6 in the books. For Matt Majinski, I'm Rich Behan. Hope you liked it. Of course, if you're watching on YouTube, a big thank you to you. Subscribe, like the videos. If you're listening to us on SoundCloud, you've been here since day one, so we appreciate you as well. So we will say goodbye, and we will talk to you again for Season 2, Episode 7, and we will hopefully get that to you soon. So everybody have a good day or night, wherever you're watching, however you're listening, and we will talk to you next time here on All the Sports.